Welcome back. Over the past year, South Africans have faced increased risks of becoming victims of fraud. That is according to the latest statistics recently released by the Southern African Fraud Prevention Service. Consumers are becoming more and more vulnerable to scams and schemes which are being carried out by highly motivated, highly skilled fraud syndicates. To help us discuss this further, Manie van Schalkwyk, Southern African Fraud Prevention Services CEO, joins us for this conversation. Manie, thank you so much for your time this evening. Just talk to us a little bit about how vulnerable are South Africans and why the vulnerability. Is it a socio-economic phenomena, or is it just that we're just too trusting as a people?
Well, thank you and good evening. Thank you for inviting me to your show. I do think it's a combination of both scenarios that you sketched. What we've seen in the first 5 months of a year compared to the previous year's 5 months is that the fraud incidents increased by a whopping 97%, which I think is quite significant. We analyzed the categories of fraud, which and the three main categories is money mules, and I'll explain that a little bit later. The second one is forged documents, and the third one is impersonation. So I think one of the biggest issues in terms of money mules is that people allow other people into their bank accounts. So usually a story goes that people say, I need to transfer money to a friend or to a family member that is in need, and can you please the bank doesn't want to open an account for me, can you please allow me just to transfer some money? It sounds innocent, but our sister company in the UK, CIFAS, has done research on money mules, which is actually a global problem, and directly linked those money mules or people that use money mules to terrorism, human trafficking, and money laundering. So it's really not so innocent as people want to give up. And I think we saw in that specific category a 97% increase.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the types of fraudulent activities that take place, but I want us to look at the provinces that are most affected. I mean, Gauteng, for example, reported about 117% increase in terms of the number of incidents. KwaZulu-Natal, 106%. Here's one that's interesting. The Western Cape, 133% of an increase. What's going on there?
Yes, we also found it interesting, although from the total fraud, Western Cape represent 8% of the total fraud, 18% in KwaZulu-Natal and 62% in Gauteng. But the increase compared to last year was not, you know, the others are like 100%, 102%, but 133% for Western Cape. Also had our eyebrows lifting. It could be that there could be, more economic activity, definitely more fraudulent activity happening in the Western Cape, but we cannot put our fingers on it.
Yeah, the types, though, that we're being susceptible to, impersonation is another one, as well as a forged documentation. Just talk to us a little bit about that. So I can pretend to be somebody completely different, and clearly it looks as though the system believes it.
Yeah, well, in terms of forged documents, let's just talk about that. Forged documents, it is syndicate fraud. People sit in shops and they create pay slips, they create bank statements, and they let people then buy that from them, and people apply for credit with these forged documents. And that is, we saw a rise of that of 69% compared to last year. But what you mentioned and touched on, impersonation, more than 200%. And what we can link that to is the various data breaches that we saw in the last couple of months. The fraudsters are starting to use that information to apply for credit and for other services. But definitely we didn't see such a sharp increase up till the end of last month. So it's really in the last 45 days which we really saw a sharp increase in impersonation.
Then, Manie, does that mean that South Africa as a whole does not take the threat on cybersecurity seriously enough? if we're to, I mean, we're talking about impersonation, right? A 264% increase of impersonation says something about either we're not paying close attention or that our system and our cybersecurity systems are not paying to mind to how innovative as well as how advanced some of these criminal syndicates are.
Yeah, and we saw that. You're 100% correct. We saw, you know, a credit bureau getting a data breach. We saw some banks data breached, one of the big chemist stores or chemist chains data breach. And people, you know, I think sometimes these data breaches leave us with a so what feeling. To say, well, what can we do? Because you and I are feeling a little bit out of it. We were not breached. But what those criminals do is they use the information that they steal. They will contact us, and they will, you know, they will say, Mr. van Schalkwyk, there's a big debit order on your account. Should we stop it? And we know where you know, this is your address, this is your telephone number, and that's the information they steal. And then they kind of get information from you, which are really the ones that make sense. They will ask for bank account detail. They will ask for PIN detail. And so we have got a role to play to make sure that we don't divulge even more information which is out there currently for sale.
And here's something that is also quite concerning, Manie, is the fact that an increase in false qualifications is sitting at about 158%. We've got a 158% increase in the number of people that are falsifying qualifications. Obviously, one would imagine that this is in light of the socioeconomic disparities that exist, as well as perhaps the unemployment rate that is a reality in the South African context.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think there's definitely a desperation factor that plays a role, that people are prepared to lie about their CVs and their qualifications to make sure they get a job. It doesn't make it right, but we do see a desperation factor.
We'll leave it there. Manie van Schalkwyk, CEO of the Southern African Fraud Prevention Services. Thank you very much for your time this evening. To this story.